development and for economic resilience. Over the course of the next 2 days, with a lineup of global stakeholders and Sri Lankan stakeholders, the Innovation Island Summit will discuss and debate critical global issues. These include the post-2030 agenda for sustainable development, harnessing digital technologies, climate adaptation and energy transition, women and youth as change makers, the blue economy and lessons from Sri Lanka's economic resurgence. We are very proud to partner with the High Commission of India to Sri Lanka and the Capital Maharaja Group for the Innovation Island Summit. Without any further delay, we're going to move to the program of the curtain raiser, and for that, I'm now going to request Santosh Jha, High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, to welcome the welcome remarks.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Namaskar. Ayubovan. I know and very conscious that this is not my stage, so I'll be brief with my remarks. First, let me welcome all of you to the first edition of the Innovation Island Summit in Colombo. In particular, those coming from outside of Sri Lanka. I'm told that we have around 200 participants from around 45 countries. I'm particularly happy that we will have a chance to listen to the views and receive guidance from the President of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Anurakumara Dissanayake. We are also fortunate that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka would also be taking part and making remarks at different times during this two-day summit. Immediately after my remarks, we will also have the pleasure to listen to Shri Amitabh Kant, a senior of mine in the civil service, and a very respected one with many distinctions. In a country where tourism is a major economic activity with great potential, you would be pleased to know that he conceived and implemented the Incredible India campaign, and before that, the God's Own Country campaign in Kerala. More recently, in 2023, Shri Amitabh Kant steered the most successful G20 summit in its history as India's G20 Sherpa during the Indian presidency of the G20. I must also thank the ORF and the Capital Maharaja Group for organizing this event. This is an effort at bringing global conversations to Sri Lanka, and in my view, this is a very good time to do so. A few observations in that context. First, Sri Lanka is on the cusp of potentially a very big change. People's aspirations and expectations have found a new expression in the two elections held in Sri Lanka last year. The COVID pandemic and the economic crisis in Sri Lanka has underlined the need for a transformation that many Lankans have yearned for generations to happen. Second, blue, green, and chrome as the three themes of the conference are most suited for Sri Lanka in its quest for transformation. Blue is an obvious choice, given that Sri Lanka is an island surrounded by waters with huge potential. Green, too, is appropriate, as Sri Lanka, as an island country, is particularly vulnerable to climate change. It is also blessed with rich potential for green energy, including for exports to other countries and in the larger Asian region. And chrome because digitization has become the new currency for low middle income countries to transcend their entrenched inefficiencies and to outgrow them, to position themselves to take full advantage of the many new opportunities and an emerging geotechnological age. My third point, and that is the last one, like any other country, Sri Lanka cannot afford to stay in isolation. Global connectivity and interdependence remain a norm even in this new era of re-globalization. Whether it is markets abroad, or critical imports, or tourism, investment, and technology, Sri Lanka needs to remain engaged with the rest of the world. This requires a better understanding of global trends and opportunities. I'm sure that this conference would help build a better appreciation of the need for global engagement as a means for fulfilling the aspirations of Sri Lankans for change, growth, and prosperity. As far as we in India are concerned, we are engaged with Sri Lanka on the basis of our neighborhood first policy and Sagar approach. Our relations are based on principles of solidarity, of sharing whatever best we can offer to each other, and being a partner of first as well as the last resort. Today, our relations are better than ever before and spread across a wide range of domains. Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, has described connectivity, energy, and digitization as the three principal pillars of our partnership. We are also engaged in other areas such as health, education, ports and airports, agriculture, fisheries, in addition to the security and defense cooperation that is very important. As civilizational twins, our partnership is a necessity and not an option. Our future is tied together even more than our past was. So among all our shared pursuits, it is important that we also have a discussion around the state of the world as well. A shared perspective and understanding would help us rise above past hesitations and old mindsets. It will help us build a new relationship which is suited for our shared aspirations, especially as the new opportunities beckon in the 21st century. So for this reason also, I'm grateful to the ORF for choosing Colombo for the first edition of the Innovation Island Summit. I hope this becomes an annual feature and a tradition like many other pursuits that the ORF has carried out around the world under the leadership of President of the ORF, Mr. Samir Saran. So thank you, welcome again, my best wishes for a very, very good conference. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. We now move to a specially curated conversation, which is the centerpiece of this curtain raiser. And I'm going to now invite our two speakers to the stage, Mr. Amitabh Kant, G20 Sherpa for India, and Dr. Samir Saran, President of the Observer Research Foundation.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome once again. And let me just tell you, I'm delighted to be here. This is my first time in Sri Lanka. And in less than, 12 hours, I'm in love with this country already. I've spent the evening with Chevaan and Ambassador Jha and others. And I'm going to be here very regularly. And you're probably going to see this conference grow, courtesy the leadership of Shashi, who's joined us here this afternoon, and Chevaan, his team. I think this must become the go-to conversation arena for all island and emerging economies around the world to come and discuss the blueprint for the future. And I think Colombo has it to be that particular arena, and I'm delighted to be here. So a warm welcome once again from my side. But let's turn to Mr. Amitabh Kant. I think what we will do is we'll break this into two parts, sir. Let me first ask you to address us, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, on your vision on both the conference and the conversations and what we are going through today in the world. And then maybe we could have a few questions with you, or drilling deeper into some of the ideas that you may have presented. So may I request you to first speak to us from the podium, sir.
His Excellency, the Ambassador of India to Sri Lanka, the distinguished Mr. Santosh Jha, the President of ORF, Mr. Samir Saran, Shashi Rajamahendran, with whom I've had the pleasure of interacting yesterday, Chevaan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted and honored to be here, and I'm particularly delighted, Samir, to see such a packed hall, but a hall with so much of energy, vibrancy, and young dynamism, which you've managed to bring here. And I entirely agree with our ambassador that you must ensure that this becomes an annual meeting and the most critical and the most important meeting and gathering of experts on both innovation and with reference to island states. I've had a particular liking for the beauty, the charm, the magnificence, and the resilience of Sri Lanka for a very long time. It's a country whose central location in the Indian Ocean and growing focus on innovation and sustainability makes it a beacon of opportunity and progress. Sri Lanka's pivotal role as a hub for global maritime trade, connecting Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, is a testament to its importance in fostering regional connectivity and economic growth. The crux is that Sri Lanka is situated along major shipping routes, and therefore it plays a crucial role in advancing international trade and logistics. Its strategic position also underscores its centrality in discussions on the blue economy, on marine conservation, on sustainable ocean-based growth. And India and Sri Lanka in particular have shared a relationship that is defined by history, culture, and I think more than anything else, a spiritual connection that spans millennia. From the shared heritage of Buddhism to the epic narratives of the Ramayana, our ties are stitched into the very fabric of our identities. Nourished by the flows of ideas, faith, and trade across the Park Strait, this bond transcends borders and speaks to the endearing spirit of neighborly kinship. To my mind, this relationship is bound by the waters of the Indian Ocean, and the relationship between India and Sri Lanka has weathered actually centuries. It is a bond that reminds us that geography may divide us, but history and destiny unites us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important that this event, which is on innovation and on island states, and island states are critical. They are critical because, ladies and gentlemen, they are spread across regions like the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the South China Sea. And they possess very distinct culture, and they possess very distinct, very, very distinct geopolitical context. And despite their diversity, they face common challenges such as vulnerability to climate change, debt burdens, and economic limitations that impede sustainable development. Many of these issues we'll discuss here. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, coastal erosion, they all pose existential threats. Infrastructure, livelihoods, economies are at risk. Look at this. Despite being an island state, Singapore in 1965 was just $516, just $516 per capita income. Today, in 2025, From $516, they have been able to take the per capita income to close to $90,000. From $516,000 to $90,000 on an island which is just 750 square kilometers. 750 square kilometers. And they've made Singapore a global powerhouse. This has been possible because in an island state, there has been good governance. It has demonstrated that if you have vision, if you have integrity with no corruption, if you develop with meritocracy, and if you pick up the best practices from across the world, you don't have to reinvent anything. The best practices have already been done in different parts of the world. Just learn from them and copy them in island states. You will grow with decisive leadership. And therefore, to my mind, with innovation, and island states require decisive leadership. Our own example of India, just a decade back, India was in the fragile five. Within a decade, India has moved from being the fragile five to the top 5 economies of the world. We are a $4 trillion economy which grew at 8.2% last year. We're the only large economy growing at that rate. And within the next 3 years, we'll overtake Japan and Germany to be the 3rd largest economy in the world. How did India move from the fragile 5 to the top 5? Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, India carried out very major structural reforms, from one tax across the economy, the goods and services tax, to the insolvency bankruptcy code, to the Real Estate Regulation Act. But one thing it did, it realized the significance and importance of free enterprise and therefore scrapped rules, regulations, procedures, acts which were built during the socialistic era. And India is the only country in the world which has scrapped 1,700 laws. It brought corporate tax on par with the world's best economies, and it opened up the foreign direct investment regime. Ladies and gentlemen, the second thing that it did was that it pushed for digitization in its economy. 1.4 billion people in India have a digital identity, and between 2015 and 2017, we opened up 550 million bank accounts. That means that 55% of the bank accounts were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India, and then we linked it up with both the digital identity and the mobile numbers. And therefore, India started doing fast payments, and today we do 50% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China is next with 20%. Ladies and gentlemen, from fast payment, our young startups started providing credit on the payment history, paperless, cashless credit, and our young startups like Zerodha grows Upstock, then took the stock market to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities and rural areas. And then we had another set of young startups like GoDigit and Acco, who then started providing insurance to people in rural areas and Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. All this is done without any paperwork, on the go, on the mobile, and all these transactions are done within 30 seconds to 1 minute. So ladies and gentlemen, I have not been to a physical bank or a bank manager or an ATM machine or used my debit or credit card ever for the last 5 years. My mobile, this mobile of mine is a virtual bank for me. Ladies and gentlemen, what the Bank of International Settlement has said that India achieved in 7 years, what it would have taken India 50 years to achieve. And India demonstrated that the cost of acquisition of a customer could fall from about $25 to 15 cents. And therefore, a new company like Reliance Jio could acquire 510 million customers in 10 months because there was no paperwork involved. Ladies and gentlemen, the third thing that has happened in India is that we've built infrastructure for our citizens. In the last 7 years, we've built 40 million houses, which is more than the population of Australia. We've provided toilets and behavioral change to 130 million people, which is more than the population of Germany. And we have provided piped water connection to 253 million citizens of India, which is more than the population of Brazil. Ladies and gentlemen, we have when we opened up our bank accounts, only 18% of the women in India had a bank account. Today, 91% of the women in India have a bank account. So ladies and gentlemen, not only that, we've built 88,000 kilometers of roads, expressways, highways, and to my mind, we've built India 4 times over than what it was 10 years back. So my view is that the capital expenditure spent on India from our GDP from 1% to 5% has paid us rich dividend. And the fourth thing that we've done is to believe in going green. We built 200 gigawatt of renewable energy, and through a transparent process of bidding, we allowed private sector investment through venture funds and PE funds to come in, and we created one grid across India's economy. And we also electrified close to 30 million houses in India. So ladies and gentlemen, our belief is that net zero is net positive. We've not polluted the world. The developed part of the world has polluted the world. We have, our contribution to greenhouse gas emission is only 1.3%. 88% of the carbon space has already been occupied by the developed world. But irrespective of that, India wants to be the first country in the world to urbanize and industrialize through a process of decarbonization, because we believe that net zero can be net positive, and that when we move towards clean energy, the size and scale of India, we can do things not at a green premium, but at a green discount. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm a great believer that island states are critical. They are critical because of climate change. They are critical because they can become unique model of growth. They are critical because they can transform the lives of their citizens. And as we navigate the complexities of global challenges, and there are many global challenges, the challenge of a war in the heart of Europe. We must all know that the World War I was fought in Europe, the World War II was fought in Europe, and a war is going on in the heart of Europe for 3.5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the global supply chains are disrupted. We are also seeing that there are new forces of production, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, which will transform lives of citizens. They will improve production and productivity, but the assumptions and algorithms on which they are based, if there is no global consensus, they also have a potential to trigger conflicts among societies. So ladies and gentlemen, we are believers in using technology to leapfrog. And as we navigate these complexities of the global challenges, the cooperation and leadership of the island states and the global south are more critical than ever. The Innovation Island Summit symbolizes a very crucial step forward in addressing the unique challenges faced by island nations and crafting collective leadership with global resonance. By uniting our strengths, experiences, and there are many, many positive and creative experiences, by fostering innovative partnerships, we will redefine global governance and pave the way for an equitable, sustainable, and a prosperous future. So ladies and gentlemen, let me compliment all of you, particularly our High Commissioner, particularly Shashi Raja Mahendran and the ORF President, Mr. Samir Saran, for their vision and for their progressive foresight and vision to build resilient economies, promote sustainable growth, and empower vulnerable communities, and to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Kant, there was a lot packed in there. So I'm going to pick up only a few of the issues that you raised. But one of the most striking comments that you made there was the decision to go green. And that is something that India has really invested in over the past decade or so. And here I want your take that to go green, you require political leadership and a conviction, but you also require global green finance to be mobilized for deployment in infrastructure projects, power projects, energy-related services. How is the mood in the world today to deploy that kind of finance in geographies such as where we are seated today?
So Samir, one of the key things that we did during India's G20 presidency was to constitute a committee under Larry Summers of Harvard and Mr. N.K. Singh to spell out the requirement of resources for emerging markets if they have to go green and if they have to achieve their sustainable development goals. Both achieving the climate goals of net zero and achieving sustainable goals where the world is severely lagging behind are two sides of the same coin. And this committee spelled out that you'd require an annual commitment of about $3 trillion per annum till 2030. The challenge is that many of the global institutions which were set up post-World War II, the IMF and the World Bank, they are both outlived their utility. They are redundant for the complexities of today. They were not designed for climate change, nor were they designed for SDGs. And they do not have the ability to mobilize private capital. There's no shortage of funds in the world. There's $300 trillion available in the world, from sovereign wealth funds to PE funds to venture funds. They need to be de-risked to enable funds to flow into countries like Seychelles, Mauritius, Sri Lanka. All island countries need resources to flow in, and it should be the ability of both IMF and World Bank to ensure that private capital is structured and is allowed to flow into these countries. Without that, it will be impossible. And therefore, our belief is that these institutions are not meant for developed part of the world. They are meant for island countries. They are meant for global south. Because without these countries growing, the world will not grow. This year, and it's important to tell you that this year, the global south, 70% of the growth in the world is going to come from the global south. According to IMF and the World Bank, for the next 3 decades, 3/4 of the growth will come from global south. You need resources to flow into the parts of the world which are growing. Europe and America are aging. Japan is aging. The population in India, Africa, Sri Lanka is young. And therefore, this population, the young part of the world, rarely have countries not created wealth when they are young. And therefore, you need resources to be flown into these parts of the world, and you need these institutions to divert themselves towards island states in the global south.
And I think this is an area that we will be discussing over the next 1.5 days, and maybe we will come to you with some ideas. As a Sherpa of the G20, perhaps it could be tabled in your conversations. But the second issue that you raised was around technology. And of course, we all are, in some sense, implicated in that world. And I can see Thilan here. Hi, Thilan. Good to see you. Again, someone who's really helped us in putting this together. ChatGPT is a household app now. But DeepSeek is the new kid in the block. What you are seeing is perhaps a zero-sum competition around technology as well. You're seeing an American-led ecosystem around AI. You're seeing a Chinese-led ecosystem. What do countries like us do? And we are being, in some sense, being forced to choose. How do we retain the ability to adopt what is good for us rather than coming into any ideological corners? What is the space for Global South in this new technological landscape?
So Samir, let me first say that the artificial intelligence race has just begun. The race is wide open. And rarely in the history of technology, a race has been won by the first innovator. You can look at the first laptop. Clive Osborne invented it, but he was not the winner. He was not the winner. Apple came out as the winner. Alta Vista did the first search engine. It went bust. The Google came on. So ladies and gentlemen, my belief is that what DeepSeek has demonstrated is its great ability to converge soft power, very clever engineering of soft power with limited hard power to do better engineering at much lower cost competitive strength, lower energy consumption than what ChatGPT, what Google, what OpenAI were doing. And that has demonstrated that actually in the next 3 to 4 decades, you will see huge, huge innovation coming out of AI. But what is important is that if you do not do innovation yourself, if the Global South doesn't do innovation yourself, you will become technology colonies of US or China. And when you become technology colonies of US or China, you will lose out your history, your culture, your civilization, because of the inherent biases that will be built into the artificial intelligence models. And therefore, it's very important that your data sets are used. If your data sets are used, your civilization, otherwise you'll forget your history. You'll forget your education, you'll forget your culture, you'll forget your backgrounds. And therefore, your data sets are very important. And therefore, AI for Sri Lanka is important. Responsible AI for Sri Lanka is important. Responsible AI for every island is important. Responsible AI for social progress is important. It's not about building large language models. It's about how AI can be used to transform learning outcomes, health outcomes, improve nutritional standards. How can a new technology of AI, which is a very powerful tool, be used to transform the lives of citizens across island states in the Global South? That, to my mind, is the real challenge.
So Global South could very well be the epicenter of the generation of, next generation of AI innovation, AI-based innovation.
Absolutely. The disruption
Pretty much like the payment systems, for example.
So why I'm saying this is that, and I'm a believer in this, and I say this because actually the technological progress in the last 3 decades in the western part of the world was made by Google, it was made by Meta, which was Facebook, and it was made by Amazon. And to some degree by Apple, and in China by Tencent and Alibaba. What we in India did was a different model. We created the digital identity layer, and on top of the digital identity layer, we allowed private sector to compete and do innovation. And therefore, in India, PhonePe competes with Google Pay, Paytm competes with Amazon Pay, everyone is competing in the market space, and our startups have disrupted in a range of areas. Now, what we did was we created an open source model. And open source model, open API, globally interoperable model, unlike the closed proprietary model of USA and China. And therefore, what we did was that we came out with a data empowerment protection architecture, and we said that the data cannot be owned by the service provider. The data is only used for transaction, but the data cannot be memorized by the computational model. And therefore, under the data empowerment protection architecture, the data belongs to the citizens of India. And to my mind, when we did the G20, this model, this principle, the definition, the framework was all accepted by all the G20 countries. And that is the way the world will grow, that is the way the world will progress, because data must be owned by the citizen and not by Google and not by Meta.
So DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure for AI, is the way forward. That how do we onboard entrepreneurship in the AI age so that the compute capabilities and the training models and the investments can actually go to the folks with the better ideas and not to the monopolies that were the winners of the last race.
So, you know, in India, we have 22 languages, official languages, and we have thousands of dialects. Now, on top of the DPI, we've brought in the AI model of Bhashani, that a person sitting in rural Bihar speaking the Bhojpuri dialect can speak in the Bhojpuri dialect. He can apply for any government scheme through voice, any state scheme, any central scheme, fill up the form, get access to any government scheme, get approval through AI within 24 hours in any of the local dialects through the Bhashani app. Now, that is what needs to be done, because we have to build up multilingual and multimodal AI platforms, which are foundational platforms in the future.
Sir, now you mentioned the G20, so let me turn to G20. You have a recent book, it's called Climbing Mount G20. And of course, there were a number of elements, but I want you to perhaps share with the audience here 2 attributes which I think are fascinating for our conversation. One is embedding Global South into India's G20 presidency, so and that process and what was the thinking and how did it play out. How was it received by the other members of the group? That's one part. And the second, what is the future of G20 in this highly supercharged world we are in, where maybe the next chair of the G20 may not be that invested in the G20. So how does G20 continue to remain relevant if some of the flag bearers of this grouping may decide that it is a project not worth investing anymore in?
So, Samir, let me first say that the United Nations, as it was constituted, has become non-functional. And the Security Council, because one of its constituents has been at war for over 3 years, has been totally dysfunctional. The only multilateral body which comprises of G7, which comprises of Global South, which comprises of China, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, is the G20. During India's G20 presidency, we ensured that African Union also becomes a member, and therefore G20 today represents about 84% of the global population, and it represents about 80% of the global GDP and about close to 75% of the global trade. So it is, to my mind, the most powerful body, and therefore, when there are challenges in the global financial architecture, if there is a challenge about global growth, if there's a challenge on global SDG, or if there's a challenge on global technology issues, or even on geopolitics, because the only place where a consensus on Russia-Ukraine war and the basic principles on which it has to be solved was accepted was in the G20. You know, it took us 300 hours and 16 drafts failed, but that is the only document where G7 countries, Russia, China, all came to an agreement. And therefore, G20 is the only multilateral body which is totally functional today. And to my mind, that body will remain functional. Multilateralism, some countries may try to say that we'll sort our issues out bilaterally, but there are issues of growth, there are issues of economic dysfunctioning, there are issues of SDG which will require multilateral cooperation, and multilateral will not go away. It's a must for the world to grow and flourish. And therefore, to my mind, there are phases when bilateralism comes into a fad because of some leadership, but it'll bounce back, and it'll bounce back with a vengeance.
But so you'll admit, it is still the G20. It is not one country, one vote like the UN is. So how do you address the concerns of the South, of those who are not in the G20? And you know, you can argue that Indonesia did well, India did well, Brazil did well, South Africa will do well. But after that, what? Then it'll go back to the European and American destinations. How do you address the concerns of the Global South when those who are sitting at the helm of the G20 in the future will have concerns which are very alien from what is important for us?
So if you read the documents which were prepared during India's presidency, they wrote the language of the Global South. We used the power of the pen. For all these years, the language used was by writing the language of the G7 because they were holding the power of the pen. But when Indonesia, when India, when Brazil, and now South Africa holds the pen, they're writing the language and they're writing what the Global South requires. And therefore, it's a powerful potent. Also within G20, actually, almost 11 countries are from the Global South, so they hold the majority today. Mm-hmm. And along with China and Russia, they actually account for about 13 of the 21 member states. And now with African Union there, it's a very, very potent force for Global South. So to my mind, if Global South wants to achieve anything today in terms of major transformation of institutions or driving growth for Global South or climate change, the only forum available to the Global South actually is to use the G20 for its benefit.
Mr. Kant, you have an old relationship with tourism. You are seen as architect of branding India, incredible India, branding Kerala, God's own country. You've been passionate about the ecology and geographies and how do you attract people to come and visit and explore them. You're sitting in a country which is by design a tourist haven in some sense. I believe this year we've had a very strong tourist season. And they have, I think, a couple of seasons in the year. So it's a 7 or 8 month tourist destination country. What can we learn from Sri Lanka? And perhaps what can Sri Lanka pick from our own experience, journeys through the years? On tourism, your view on tourism, how important, how should we make it sustainable, and how should we make it attractive for the higher paying customers? That's something you've been speaking about.
So first, let me say that there is no product like Sri Lanka. There are very few destinations in the world which have beaches, which have wildlife, which have culture, which have architecture, which have history, which have backwaters, all combined together.
And food.
And cuisine and culture, all this. You know, no other destination in the world has a product like Sri Lanka. My view about Sri Lanka is that it needs to go up the value chain. And therefore, it's a destination which, to my mind, should never be sold for less than about $600 to $700 a night. And that's a question of how you position it. Because we are selling, if you sell a destination for peanuts, you'll get monkeys. And you are selling it too cheap. So, you know, I'll give you my own experience of Kerala. When I became, incidentally, when I became Secretary of Tourism in Kerala, Kerala used to be a $20 a night destination. The only product was the Kovalam beach. Cheap charter flights used to come. There used to be garbage collectors and cobblers from England who used to come. They used to enjoy the beach of Kovalam worth about $700, but they used to spend $20 per night. So we closed, and that had led to encroachments, that had led to garbage, that had led to filth, so we closed Kovalam. But we opened up new products, the backwaters of Kerala. We brought back Ayurveda, and we said it's not a therapy or a massage, it's a regimen for 21 days. You can only get treated if you do it for 21 days. So long holidays, long spends. And we went back to the roots of Kerala. We went back to the traditional Kerala architecture, the Nalkittam houses, which are the most beautiful houses ever. You know, I mean, they are on par with the Jeffrey Bawa houses of Sri Lanka. So they were being burnt and they were being destroyed because Gulf money had come in. We restored them and we brought them back center stage. We went back to the traditional Kerala culture, Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, Thayyam. We went back to the traditional Kerala martial art. Kalripet, which is the mother of all martial art. And we went back to traditional Kerala cuisine, appam and stew, which nobody had heard of then. And we said that this is God's own country. We branded it as God's own country, but we said that resorts will be operated as boutique resorts by the private sector, but the government will provide the last mile connectivity. So we provided the roads, we provided the jetty, and we said we will do the branding campaign in partnership with the private sector. We will use them, but we spent money on branding it as God's own country. We stuck with it. Governments have changed in Kerala, communist to Congress, Congress to communists every 5 years. But the branding has been predictable, consistent for the last 30 years as God's own country. It's got etched into the minds of people. And National Geographic Traveler declared it as one of the 10 exotic paradises of the world. Because they said that when you combine this beauty of Kerala with this backwater and Ayurveda, with high physical quality of life index and human development index, there's no other place like this. No other place, and that's why it's God's own country. But to my mind, Sri Lanka is better than Kerala. Sri Lanka's human development index, its physical quality of life index, and its natural beauty is 10x better than Kerala. It needs branding, it needs private participation.
I must alert you that tomorrow morning you have to be back in Kerala. Yeah. I'm just alerting you. So you are going to be received there. Yeah. So, but I get your point. Now, where did we move from $20? You started with that number $20 per night. Where are we now in Kerala?
You can't get in the peak season, you can't get a room for less than $500, $600 for love or money. And many hotels sell it for $1,000, $1,200 a night. So, because it's moved up the value chain. There are resorts, it's a creation of private entrepreneurship. It's a creation of great boutique resorts.
So, but I think this is high praise that Sri Lanka is perhaps one of those destinations that is ripe for.
So, you know, to my mind, great tourism destinations are those which are not, for instance, we branded India as Incredible India, and that was, again, at the peak of a crisis. I'm talking about a crisis because Kerala, many of us go through crisis. I got the job of a posting of a secretary as a punishment posting in Kerala. I was without a posting for a long time, and then they posted me as secretary tourism, and I was able to do this. And then, I went
Wait,
to,
you were posted as secretary tourism because no one wanted that job?
Nobody wanted that job.
Okay.
Then I went to Government of India, and as soon as I went, the Twin Tower blast happened in New York. There was war in Afghanistan. There was an attack on our parliament. And there were travel advisories against India. We had very few hotels, but only 10% occupancy. That was the time when Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, all had stopped their marketing campaign. We went to tour operators. We said, we'll buy your packages on the tour operator brochures. You promote and market India. They said, even if you buy packages, nobody will come to India because there's no consumer demand. At the peak of that crisis, we launched Incredible India, and again, we went back to the roots of India. Ayurveda, meditation, yoga, all this. Because my belief is that a product is a great product when you differentiate it from the rest of the world. And Sri Lanka's product is very different from anything else that the western part of the world has. Never ape the West. Never ape America. Be the original Sri Lanka. Build your brand value around Sri Lanka. You'll create the greatest product in the world.
Sir, I think that's a fascinating note to close this conversation on. Brand Sri Lanka and be Sri Lanka, and that's what is going to be the basis of this arena we are creating, the Innovation Island Summit. It's an arena where ideas out of Sri Lanka for the world.
And for island states, the biggest innovation you can do is around tourism and in digital public infrastructure. It will enable the island states to technologically and tourismly pole vault.
That's a great note to end on. Please join me in applauding Mr. Kant for his contribution this afternoon. And Sunena, can I turn it to you, please?
Thank you for that incredible start to the conference. If I can request Mr. Kant and Dr. Saran to move to the front of the stage for a photo. A special thank you, in fact, to Mr. Kant for joining us in Colombo for the conference. I'm now going to request Chevaan Daniel, Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Group, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon and Ayubowan, ladies and gentlemen. It's truly a privilege to stand before you this afternoon and to see all of you here. I am here to thank the wonderful Mr. Kant for his brilliant contribution to us today. It would be remiss of me if I didn't recognize the presence of His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India, Santosh Jha, the distinguished delegates from around the world, my dear friend, the President of ORF, Samir, Saran, the Chairman of the Capital Maharaja Group, Sashi Raja Mahendran, the CEO of the group, Mr. Suresh Srinivasan, and my friends from the High Commission of India, particularly Navya, who was a huge part of this entire process. Thilan was part of it. It's a real privilege to see all of you here and welcome you. You know, the breadth of your knowledge and the depth of your impact is astounding, Mr. Kant. You've been here for just over 24 hours, and the impact that you've made with your ideas is astonishing. And ultimately, it's about ideas. I think it was Victor Hugo who once said that there is no army on earth who can withstand the force of an idea whose time has come. And I somehow feel this morning, or this afternoon, that the idea is a new world that we are creating, and our time is now. You know, Mr. Kant, we are very proud of you. I'll tell you why. We are proud of you as the Global South because, as a thought leader, you stand shoulder to shoulder with thought leaders from around the world, and it's nice to see a brown face amongst them, telling the world what it is, as it is. We are proud of you. And the impact that you've made in just this short space, I think, will last for a long time to come. Mr. Kant, as they say, you may leave Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka will not leave you. So we hope we'll see you here sooner rather than later. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please join me in giving him a warm round of applause for his contribution this evening and hopefully for the future as well. My job is done. It's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to interact now, and the next half a day and tomorrow, I'm sure, is going to be wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Ayubowan.
Thank you, Chevaan. We now have a few quick housekeeping announcements. Of course, we hope to see you all this evening at the inauguration. We have the presidential address at 7:30 p.m. Before that, we have the opening plenary at 7 p.m. And we encourage you to be here early for it. And the room will be open from 6:15 onwards. The doors will now open, and we also have some light lunch and networking after this. And also, some of you have been invited for roundtables which are slotted for this afternoon. We have members of our team outside near the registration desk who can guide you to the venue for the roundtables. See you later.